A couple of days ago, I made a post on Threads that went like this: stop overthinking your mix, please. Clear low end, balanced mids, and no ear fatigue equals you're good. This thread ended up getting like over 10,000 views, and something that usually happens on that platform when anything gets a lot of views is that a lot of people ask questions because they need help about this very simple topic that you're talking about that you only have 500 characters to explain. Unfortunately, the other part is that a bunch of really mean people just start calling you stupid or calling you out of your name or saying like really messed up things to you simply because you had an idea on the platform. So even though most of those comments are people genuinely having nice conversations, there were a few people that were attacking me because I couldn't explain the concept in a video essay. So here we are. Not because of those people, and I don't really want to talk about them that much more, but because this started so much of a conversation, I thought it would be interesting to bring a very valuable explanation of how this concept can actually help your mixes get better instantly. I've spent a healthy 5-figure amount and over 5 years, the last half decade, testing this simple statement for you. So today I want to show you the simplest ways to achieve the clarity and balance you want without learning complicated concepts or paying for expensive VSTs. And even if you think you're not overthinking your mixes now, I'll show you the one mistake that 99% of producers and engineers make to ruin their mix before they even start. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I think the best place to begin is with an issue that makes mixing hard for producers, artists, and engineers in the first place. So on my post, someone called Chelsea made a pretty dope suggestion, and it went like this: I recently discovered the app ChatGPT allows you to upload a song where it will analyze the track for you, BPM, frequency, genre, etc. Then you can ask it for detailed mix notes. She then goes on to talk about how even though she's not an engineer, this can be something that's pretty helpful if you're stuck. So I tried it. The first track that I tried it on was with my new single, You Upset. I asked it to analyze the mix overall and compare it to something like what Gunna would make, because that was the inspiration for the track. Check out the breakdown appearing somewhere on the screen if you haven't seen that already. It did give me some interesting notes, but for this particular track, I did not find these useful. For example, it suggested that I add more compression, and just from my understanding, style, and taste, I didn't think that compressing it even more would lead to a better sound. It almost tries to make the suggestion that there's no compression happening at all, which is definitely not the case. However, the place where it aired the most was with its frequency analysis. It suggests that I'm not leaving space for the vocals, which is interesting because I did that in series in my project. So if we just go over there, we can demonstrate that right now. The reason this particular criticism was interesting to me is because it seems as if ChatGPT scraped the internet for a bunch of analysis of songs in general, and then judged that since in my mixing style, I like to have certain instrumental elements a little bit louder because I am bass heavy, similar to something you might hear Wonder Girl produce, that I should compensate by either reducing those elements or making the vocal way louder. Or another thing it suggested was frequency unmasking, right? Now, outside of the fact that I already leveled the things pretty well to my liking, and the vocal is sent through a robust series of processing that makes it very loud, I also went out of my way to unmask it from particular instruments and track groupings that I knew would cover up its ability to be present. Particularly, I used the unmasking feature in Neutron to remove frequencies from the melody and the low end that would cover up my vocals. So as we see right here, I'm on the equalizer for the melody composite track, and we'll see that the dynamic EQ is reducing frequencies where my vocal is clashing with this instrument group.
Double my cup, double my ice when we fuck, she look in my eyes. Tell lil' bro cut all that, yeah, get back to back in my fries.
Anywhere we see that orange is where these two signals are clashing, and since I'm on an equalizer for the melody, what I'm doing is reducing volume at those frequencies so that those frequencies in my vocals sound clearer without me having to do anything else. And OpenAI is saying that I didn't do this. Further, the melody wasn't the only place I did this, right? As I said, I also did it on the low end for this composite track right here. So if we play it again, you'll see that anywhere that orange is playing, this static EQ is reducing the volume of those frequencies so that my vocal can be a little louder.
Double my cup, double my ice when we fuck, she look in my eyes. Tell lil' bro cut all that, yeah, get back to back in my fries. Pussy ass nigga cry me a river, I'm surfing that shit for life. Fuck your bitch and gave her back, you crying bro, that's life.
And I did think for a second that maybe it was suggesting that I compress more for loudness, but then when I go back to the meter to look at things, I'm getting quite a bit of loudness out of my track.
Double my cup, double my ice when we fuck, she look in my eyes. Tell lil' bro cut all that, yeah, get back to back in my fries.
I would say my track is very, very loud. So for that first demonstration, I didn't feel like ChatGPT gave me anything useful, but Let's continue. So the next track that I tested this on was with a collab that I'm doing with my homie Treby. It should actually be dropping this month on my Beats account on Spotify, so do be on the lookout. And I might even break it down here. That being said, I passed it through analysis in ChatGPT and it gave me, again, a very interesting list of things. Now, because this track is still in the demo stage, I believe some of these notes could be a little bit more useful, but again, I really do want to take this with a grain of salt. So let's take a listen to a section of the beat so far. Okay, and let's see what it suggested. It's saying that the mids sound subdued, that it could use more compression, and that it's too quiet. So first, let's take a look at the frequency distribution using tonal balance. That is actually accurate, and again, since this is unmixed, these notes will actually be more useful. So something we can do to fix that very simply is we can go over to band for band, drag over this soft clipper preset in here instead, link the equalizer. By the way, you can find my band for band kit in the description below. And using this equalizer, we want to accentuate the frequencies that tonal balance says we're missing. Wow, and that really evened it out so much. Okay, so that's 1 W for ChatGPT so far. Didn't start out too hot, but it's getting there. Let's check out what else it said. It said that it wasn't as loud as it could be and that we were lacking compression. So we can fix loudness and compression with some soft clipping, which is a concept of compression. Check out the soft clipping video and newsletter down below. They might also be appearing on the screen right now. That being said, this is actually pretty simple. We just come back into our chain. We go to Blue Cat Audio, and we'll just push gain into our clipper until we get a level of loudness that we like. It said to go for 9, so let's see what we're at to start. At about 11, okay, so let's push and see what we can get out of that. So between about a 2 and 3 dB gain push into that clipper is gonna get us all the loudness we need, and that's awesome because not only is the actual gain push into the clipper going to literally give us more volume and loudness, but also using soft clipping itself is going to squeeze the dynamic range of the master, which is gonna take care of that compression for us. So in that case, ChatGPT was actually very useful. My only note with this example would be that you have to really know what you're looking for in the first place to make any use of these notes. And this actually caused me to think about quite a bit when I was putting this video essay together, because I really think AI sort of forces the consumer and the producer to ask themselves a lot of questions. And I think particularly in our case, some of those questions are like, are you gonna believe the computational analysis from AI based on the synthesis from random human sources over the experimentally verified and practically demonstrated precepts of talented musicians developed over years of refining their taste? Is a free AI just telling you something more accurate than something like tonal balance or a loudness meter, things that are provably accurate that you can learn to read on your own? And to be real, I don't know what the answer is. Let me know down below what you think. What I can say is that my head hurts just thinking about what ChatGPT gave me in terms of analysis, and it genuinely didn't make suggestions that will make my music better for the most part. Because again, those notes were only useful because I knew what it was talking about in the first place, and as you guys see in every video, those are things I literally do in every track. Take it with a grain of salt though. That's just me, a professional, making a professional judgment about his professional work. If you take nothing else away from this point, let it be that you have to avoid the creative tendency to complicate things. You kind of want to avoid the top-down approach that ChatGPT forces you through, where you have to start with the most complicated concepts and tools and work your way down. While all of it is something that's cool to mess around with, your music itself will get better if you just learn the fundamentals that have been around since the beginning of time. It's kind of like how ChatGPT could actually give you a bunch of fitness advice about how to lose weight. It could give you a whole essay. It could write you a book on it. It could give you all the new fads and all the latest inventions and gimmicks and supplements and stuff like that. But it is instantly verifiable that no matter what it says, the best answer will always be less calories in, better quality of calories, moderate amounts of exercise, decent sleep, blah, 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 blah. The boring stuff, right? And I think it's exactly the same with mixing, actually. The simple, boring stuff always gets you the best results. For me, it's just cleaning the low end and balancing the mids with solid equalization, and then small amounts of compression here and there, really just through the use of soft clipping. The result, at least for me in my career, has been a clean, powerful mix that doesn't fatigue the listener, and that's all you need. And I've been able to do that with no ChatGPT, using very simple concepts. So if you want to learn those very simple mixing concepts and a bunch of stuff about branding that I teach to 6- and 7-figure creators and musicians, consider joining my newsletter. And if you're a producer, you get a free kit with sounds from my placements and viral beats. I also bring the readers rare gems from all of my studio sessions, whether it be about networking, general mannerisms and methods for conducting yourself better, as well as nitty-gritty technicals about mixing itself. Simple gems, free gifts, no spam, unsubscribe whenever you want. Check it out down below in the first link in the description. But getting back to it, what are the simple, boring precepts that will actually make our mixes so much better if we just use them consistently? My mentor taught me something really cool about frequency masking. And the way he explained it to me was that frequency masking is important in general, or rather frequency unmasking, because you want to make sure that the most important things in your mix are clear at all times, because as a listener, our brain literally can only hear and process 2 or 3 things that are actually happening in the piece of music at any one time. And so based on that, he gave me a concept to make sure that those very important elements of my mix are always present, and it's the big 3. Now with this concept, you use it to guide you on the things that should be the most loud and most present in your mix. I prefer the word most present, or I prefer the phrase most present to loudest, simply because it gets the idea across better, but let me talk you through it. Basically, you're gonna want your low end to be the loudest thing in the mix. Kicks, bass, 808s, and things of that nature. The next loudest thing in your mix is actually going to be the main snare. So these things are driving that body, the energy, and the rhythm. Then the third loudest, or the third most present thing, is actually going to be that lead vox, those vocals. Now, this gets into why I use the word present instead of loud, because loudness can sometimes accidentally imply that you mean more by gain amount, when that isn't necessarily true, and that might be a bad way to judge it, especially since things like lead voxes, or if you are working on an instrumental, it would be the main melody. Those kinds of things have a very wide frequency distribution that allows them to be louder without as much like amount of gain actually applied to it if you measured it by decibels, right? So like your vox, for example, might actually be a little bit quieter than some of the drum elements, or especially if you're working on something like an instrumental. But that being said, you can use things like effects and equalization to make sure that it's still very present. When I was studying daily under my mentor, he demonstrated that this concept will work really well for many types of genres: pop, pop rock, metal, hip hop, R&B, and things of that nature. So let me just give you a practical demonstration of the big 3. So if we get into this project, I've already done a lot of mixing and processing, but it doesn't mean we can't still demonstrate this, because it is something I still am working on. So if we start with this low-end composite track, we know that based off of what we've talked about so far, this has got to be the loudest, most present thing in our mix. Great, I like how it's hitting, I like its presence overall, it's good. That's just gonna be kind of my anchor, right? So now the next thing we've got to add is that main clap, and I'm not gonna consider any other drums except that. Okay, I really like that. I just tweaked the volume just a little bit right now, but barely. I just reduced it slightly so that it could be a little bit less present than that 808. And then later I actually will sidechain the clap to the 808 so that it dips it. As a matter of fact, why don't we just do that right now? So what I'm gonna do is sidechain this big drum bus to the low end composite. Then I'm gonna add a fruity limiter, open my preset from Band for Band, the basic sidechainer, and then I'll set this up really quickly. And that's gonna let that clap be even more present. And that's what I'm going for always, is that presence, and sidechaining is one way that I can take care of that. Check out the band for band full guide down below if you wanna learn more about how I do a lot of this signal flow stuff. It's 100% free, it's right here on this YouTube channel. And then next is that Vox, that's that last thing that's gotta be most present.
Nigga broke, filet-o-trout. We got rich by running routes. Kept this shit on fucking lock, like my name was Eddie House. Shout out on my Crips, blue bandana on my hip.
So right, whereas that 808 was like right at 1 and that clap was like right around 1.52, that Vox is like right around -3, which makes sense just based on how I level stuff. Understanding this big 3 concept, seeing it in demonstration is good, so now I'm just analyzing that.
Nigga broke, filet-o-trout. We got rich by running routes. Too close and you get clipped. I only bow down to my blick. Give me lip, I up my shit. Hey, shout out to my po. And you get hit, you touch my sip.
Solid, I really like that. All of those elements sound clear, and in relationship to each other based on the big 3, everything is good. So from here, you just literally fit everything else into that. So let's start with the complementing accent drums.
Nigga broke, filet-o-trout. We got rich by running routes. Kept this shit on fucking lock, like my name was Eddie House. Shout out on my Crips, blue bandana on my hip. Take a look or take a pic.
Now let's fit in that melody.
Blue bandana on my hip. Take a look or take a pic. But get too close and you get clipped. I only bow down to my blick. Give me lip, I up my shit.
Let's just take a look at tonal balance real quick and see what it tells us, even though I'm not at that phase of the mix yet.
Nigga broke, filet-o-trout. We got rich by running routes. Kept this shit on fucking lock, like my name was Eddie House. Shout out on my Crips, blue bandana on my hip. Take a look or take a pic. But get too close and you get clipped. I only bow down to my blick.
So it looks pretty solid so far. So the big 3 pretty much always does that, gives me a really good foundation. And then I clean it up with other skills, bits of knowledge, and tools like tonal balance, meters, spectral analysis, and things of that nature. Now, as awesome as the big 3 concept is, and as helpful and as useful as it will be as a fundament of your mixing philosophy, there is actually something that affects your mix more than anything else we've talked about so far. So there was someone else who left a comment on that post, and this person called Rory said, "You want to stop overbuilding your arrangements. You don't need those extra 4 synth pads that you can barely hear, and they'll just muddy things up. Always serve the song." And he's right, for 3 specific reasons that I was able to come up with. For one, the more stuff you add, the more stuff you have to mix. Practically speaking, that's just a math thing. 2, the more stuff you add, the more you necessarily have to distract the listener from the things that are the most important. And 3, at a point, the more you add, the less creative your work actually becomes. And that's a point that a lot of like pseudo creatives like to argue with. And oh, don't I love it, because one of the people that are the most misquoted in terms of creatives that are prolific in this day and age is Rick Rubin. And they probably say something like, well, Rick Rubin probably says to just follow your heart and to add whatever you want to the beat to make it sound really good, and the track can benefit from whatever your imagination says to add to it. But actually, if this nincompoop would bother to read anything that Rick Rubin has actually published, they'd quickly learn that he has a very almost dogmatic creed about why less is more. Like, even just today, I was reading his book, and in a chapter called The Craft Phase, he says the following: "In this phase, we begin with a project that has naturally developed." You know, he discusses these various phases that you go through: a phase of exploration, a phase of experimentation, and then you get to this craft phase, right? And then there's another phase called completion, so maybe we need to go through this book. But he continues and says, "We recognize the potential in it, this thing that we've created so far, and we see that we can add, take away, or combine to further develop it." He goes on to say, "The craft phase is not just a building up, it is also a breaking down. The goal of developing the work can be accomplished through a pruning process of small cuts. We decide which details and directions might be removed so that more energy and focus can be used to feed the core elements." I can't explain this concept too deep because this will turn into a video essay inside of a video essay, but I can tell you that this is the thing that separates the noobs from the people who do this shit for real. This separates those pseudo creatives from the people who live and breathe creative. This kind of understanding that, like, it's not just throwing shit at a wall and just feeling whatever you want to feel. There's a very important process of pruning based on your understanding, your experience, and your taste. So here are a few examples of how I'm using this concept in my single any amount. So let's jump back into the project. The best first example I can give you is that There's only one melody usually going on at any point in the track, and this goes back to the big three concept of me not really wanting to do too much to distract from those big three things. If you actually listen to some of the most tenured and accomplished producers of our time, you'll kind of notice that they have a tendency to have a solid drum groove driven by 4 to 8 instruments at most, good bass, and one solid melodic instrument. You know, I'm thinking of people like Pharrell, Kanye, Chad Hugo. Even if I'm thinking about someone like Zaytoven, who really inspired me to get into production in the first place, I learned a lot about layering melodies from him, but something that I actually noticed in his production is that he only has all of those layers ever stacked for specific parts, like maybe a bridge, the intro, or the outro. Otherwise, it's one, maybe 2 elements going at a time. And he's a producer more than anybody else who understands the importance of letting that vocal shine and having your beat be a really good template that the artist can perform on. So in this section, there's only one lead melody going.
In your mouth, now them shooters at your house, any amount. He a mouse, so we gotta take him out.
Right here is where we get to pretty much the only part that I've worked on so far where more than one melody is playing. The choir comes on with the lead melody here.
Hey, yo, Trout, we got rich by running routes. Kept this shit on fucking lock, like my name was Eddie House. Shout out all my...
But then it drops back to the lead again, but this is a different lead now.
Blue bandana on my head. Take a look or take a peek, but get too close and you get clipped.
Goes back to a different lead, and then when we get to this bridge section, it's actually just the choir.
Do anything for Poe, I'll do anything for smoke. Roll some dope, then roll some more, and invite all of them hoes.
You can even see this concept demonstrated a little bit further in my drum programming. The programming itself is very simple. I mean, look at that open hat, look at the hi-hats, which is as complicated as any kind of programming gets in here, and I'm strongly considering just going to a bouncy 2-step kind of pattern. And now I'm kind of in that craft process, as Rick Rubin talks about, of trying to decide if the track maybe benefits a little bit more from a slightly reduced hi-hat pattern. And again, this isn't anything too complicated, but just to let you know about the kind of stuff I think about when I reach that craft phase. But again, simple clap, simple snare bounce, simple 808 pattern. Even the amount of layers itself, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 total drum layers in this entire track. And thinking about it in this way almost forces you, as we were talking about with the melody, to pull things out and add them back in as your track progresses. And a lot of times you might hear in arrangement tutorials or when you get tips about arrangement that you want to do this to keep things interesting. But at least for me, a helpful way to think about it to make my beats better is not necessarily trying to make the beat more interesting, but just so that things don't get cluttered and annoying and fatiguing to the listener, right? And then it being an interesting piece of music by the end of that is kind of just a byproduct of me trying to make it good for the listener in the first place. So yes, understanding arrangement better overall will really help your mixing. At least in my experience, I noticed that my mixing got drastically better around the time that I started focusing on my beat structuring. Artists were complimenting my mixing more even though I hadn't really changed anything about it. So if you want to learn exactly how I arrange my instrumentals for major placements and viral beats right here on this channel, check out this arrangement guide appearing on your screen or in the description.